After the last golden hedgehog that drains your rings constantly I covered was, at least in my opinion, one of the most tedious characters I've ever played with in SRB2. I'm glad to say Golden's Metal Sonic is a much better implementation of the concept of a ring loss character. I feel Terrionic has recognised some of the fault with Ice's Supersonic and created a character that is, once again in my opinion, a lot more fun to play. Let's dive into why. Firstly, Golden Metal Sonic is a little different in why he loses rings, and the consequences you get for not having rings is significantly less severe. For a start, you're able to simply turn off the ring loss feature using Custom 1 and stick to GMS's basic moveset, because unlike Supersonic, reaching 0 rings does not count as an instant death. Rings aren't naturally lost over time, instead they are now treated more as a resource than a timer. When you have toggled ring loss off, GMS's only ability is a much weaker version of Metal Sonic's hover, as no matter how fast you go, you'll always start falling back to the ground, just at a much slower pace than normal. Without rings, you have no dash mode, no unique spin ability, nothing. I prefer this personally, as you don't need to be careful while playing to make sure you collect every ring and capsule as possible to stave off your imminent demise, as in Supersonic's case, it really undermines just how powerful he is. But when you do get some rings and toggle on ring loss mode, Golden Metal Sonic jumps into high gear. As a passive ability, you now have access to a tweaked dash mode called the Ring Boost, which is now faster, activates at a lower speed threshold, and is able to destroy Knuckles' walls, although it comes at a cost of removing your immunity to enemies. This also comes at the cost of 1 ring per second, but considering how fast you move and your increased ring magnetism, this by itself isn't really going to drain your ring balance much. However, start adding in your new abilities, and you'll need to start being a little more strategic about how you utilize your rings. Pressing spin in air will cause you to use the Ring Crush, a 3-ring ground pound that destroys enemies, breaks capsules, and busts through spikes and breakable floors. Personally though, I didn't use this ability all that much, and considering that Metal Sonic can access every Sonic route, which are almost universally faster than the Amy ones, I think this ability is probably more useful as a way to hold your momentum during platforming sections. Golden Metal Sonic's truly ring depleting abilities are still to come however. Of course, holding jump will allow you to use the Ring Propeller, essentially a clone of Metal Sonic's hover, although I don't think it ever starts to fail. That might just be because the reduced speed you need to reach to enter Ring Boost means you'll likely just end up entering it while using this though. It drains 1 ring per second, which is pretty low, but because it stacks with the Ring Boost cost, using for long periods will essentially mean a ring drain of 2 rings per second, which can burn through your supplies pretty quickly, especially when using GMS's final ability, Ring Dash. Pressing spin while using the Ring Propeller will send you forwards and upward for a pretty considerable distance, which can often lead to you being able to skip pretty major chunks of a level. However, it comes at the major cost of 10 rings per use, which thankfully stops it from being so powerful of a tool that it overshadows the rest of the moveset. This ability in particular was what really caused me to burn through rings. Overall, I think Golden Metal Sonic essentially took the idea of a ring loss moveset that had already been attempted by a few other mods and refined it, both by changing rings from being less of a timer and more of a resource, and by making the consequence for losing all your rings significantly less severe, which exponentially reduces frustration. You won't believe this, but Golden Metal Sonic doesn't have the most awe-inspiring set of custom sprites, what with him being a recolor and all that. I know, I couldn't believe it myself. To be honest, I'm not entirely sure what they could have done for a sprite with a concept like a Golden Metal Sonic other than this anyway, and if there's one vanilla character that it feels like you could reasonably just duplicate and recolor, it is the literal mass-produced robot. So overall, I'm pretty neutral on the sprites as there wasn't really anything else they could have done, but at the same time, I can't exactly give great marks for spriting when you haven't actually made any new ones. In conclusion, Golden Metal Sonic feels like a refinement of a concept that's played around with Ice's Supersonic mod, with the improvements mostly being due to how rings are now treated less as a timer and more as a resource. You're no longer treating a level as a mad dash to the finish line, now you're thinking more strategically about when to turn off the brakes, turn on ring loss, and put pedal to the metal, and then when to reapply them again. At least in my opinion, that's a really interesting concept, although I'm sure there will be those who prefer the alternate way of doing things that Supersonic has. And for all the grief I give that mod, I have heard that there have been a few updates that tweak a lot of what I find frustrating. So really, you have no excuse not to try both. However, this mod is brought down slightly by the lack of new sprites. With a concept like Golden Metal Sonic, there isn't really much you could have really done with the sprites themselves, but even adding some particle effects could help to make the mod more unique. Overall, a solid 7 out of 10. I hope you enjoyed the video, and ciao.